In the darkest hours of World War II, when the future of the free world trembled on a knife's edge, one of the strangest weapons in human history was born. A weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. A weapon powered not by engines. Not by electricity. Not by human pilots or mechanical computers. But by pigeons. Yes, ordinary pigeons. Feathered animals that flutter above city streets, became instruments of war. This is the true, untold story of Project Pigeon. A secret American program that attempted to turn birds into living guidance systems for precision bombs. A story buried beneath classified archives for decades. A story of genius, desperation, and the limits of human imagination in wartime. Today, we open the doors to that forgotten laboratory. And we reveal what really happened. By 1942, the United States faced a terrifying reality. Across the Atlantic, Adolf Hitler's war machine dominated Europe. The Luftwaffe bombed cities into dust. German U-boats strangled shipping lanes. And deep under concrete bunkers and industrial roofs, Nazi engineers built weapons capable of altering the war. America needed precision. Not more bombs. But a way to guide them. Yet the technology simply didn't exist. There were no smart missiles. No GPS. No guided drones. Targeting was done the old way. Drop a bomb and pray it hits something valuable. But praying wasn't working. Factories kept turning. Rail lines recovered. V-weapon sites hid underground. Every missed target meant more American lives lost. And so, in the middle of this crisis, the U.S. military turned to a man who had an idea unlike any other. His name was Burrhus Frederick Skinner. Not a general. Not a pilot. Not an engineer. He was a psychologist, a quiet, bespectacled scientist from Harvard University. A man whose life was dedicated to studying the mind, memory, and how animals learn. But Skinner was no ordinary academic. He was brilliant. He was unconventional. And he was fearless when it came to ideas. And in 1940, he experienced something that changed the course of history. It was a cold afternoon, December 1940. Skinner sat inside a train rattling through the countryside. Outside the window, the world streamed by, farms, fields, scattered homes. But one thing caught his attention. A flock of pigeons. Gracefully, effortlessly, they glided alongside the train. Matching its speed. Tilting their wings with perfect control. Changing direction with instant precision. Skinner stared, mesmerized. And then, the idea hit him. What if, these creatures, could guide a bomb? He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. He wrote it down. And the moment he stepped off that train, his life, and perhaps the war, took a dramatic turn. Skinner rushed home and began drawing diagrams. A bomb, with a nose cone. Inside that nose, a small screen. Behind the screen, a pigeon. Trained to peck directly at the target. Wherever the pigeon pecked, sensors would adjust the bomb's fins. Left. Right. Up. Down. A living autopilot. To any ordinary person, it sounded insane. But Skinner wasn't ordinary. He believed animals could learn anything. If trained correctly. And so, he wrote a proposal and submitted it to the National Defense Research Committee. Within weeks, the United States government approved $25,000 for research, over $500,000 in today's money. The military wanted anything, that could help. Project Pigeon had begun. Skinner set up a laboratory at the General Mills Research Facility in Minneapolis. Yes, General Mills. The cereal company. Behind locked doors, engineers and psychologists began building bomb casings, training screens, and tracking systems. Outsiders had no idea what was happening. Workers whispered rumors. Some believed they were building a giant cereal oven. Others thought it was a weather machine. No one guessed the truth. Inside the lab, dozens of pigeons lived in custom cages. They were fed, cared for, and treated gently. Skinner often joked that the pigeons were the smartest employees in the building. He wasn't wrong. Training began with simple tasks. A pigeon was placed in a small chamber. A screen displayed a circle, representing an enemy ship or building. If the pigeon pecked the circle, it received food. And pigeons learned fast. Soon they could peck moving targets. Then shrinking targets. Then targets hidden behind fake clouds or smoke. Skinner pushed them harder. He hung screens at angles. He shook the chamber. He blasted loud sounds. He flickered lights. He recreated turbulence, wind, and the chaos of a falling bomb. But the pigeons never stopped pecking. Never hesitated. Never panicked. Their accuracy was extraordinary. Some pigeons achieved over 90% target consistency, better than any guidance system available at the time. Skinner was ecstatic. The military was curious. In 1943, Skinner invited military officials to witness the world's first full demonstration of a pigeon-guided bomb. They entered the room skeptical, some already smirking. Skinner placed a trained pigeon inside the bomb's guidance nose. A scaled-down model enemy ship appeared on the screen. The pigeon began pecking immediately. The bomb's fins responded. Left. Right. Left. Nose down. Correcting, adjusting, homing in. The model bomb moved across its track with uncanny precision. Dead center impact. The room fell silent. Skinner repeated the test. Again, direct hit. And again. And again. By the end of the demonstration, the officers were no longer smirking. They were whispering. Project Pigeon was no longer a joke. It was now a potential weapon. But not everyone was impressed. High-ranking military figures refused to accept the idea. Some laughed openly. Others called it absurd, ridiculous, and a circus act in uniform. One officer famously said, "I refuse to explain to the President of the United States that our new secret weapon is a bird." Despite the success, the project faced mockery everywhere it went. And yet, Skinner kept going. He believed the pigeons could save lives. He believed his idea could end the war sooner. He believed science would triumph over ridicule. But the war was speeding forward. And time was running out. By mid-1943, Project Pigeon was no longer a quirky experiment. It became something real. Something promising. Something worth fighting for. Skinner refined his method. He created a triple pigeon system. 3 birds trained on the same target, each inside its own capsule. If one pigeon became distracted, the other 2 would overrule it. If 2 disagreed, the third decided. Like a tiny biological computer. Their combined pecking patterns created a guidance solution. And it worked. Under test conditions, the tri-pigeon guidance system achieved accuracy rates comparable to, and sometimes exceeding, the Navy's most advanced electromechanical systems. The pigeons were outperforming machines. Yet the program still lived in secrecy. Whispers. Rumors. And a growing sense of disbelief from outsiders. In late 1943, Skinner and his team brought their invention to a remote testing ground. A long concrete platform. Metal rails. Target screens. A wind generator. And a full-scale mock-up of the bomb's nose section. The test. Could pigeons guide a life-size bomb casing toward a target while enduring simulated battlefield chaos? Engineers loaded the pigeons into their chambers. Screens activated. The image of an enemy ship faded into view. A whistle blew. The bomb casing was released. Sliding along the rail. Air gusts hammered its surface. Its nose rocked violently. Inside, the pigeons pecked furiously, adjusting the bomb's virtual trajectory with each strike. Left. Right. Down. Correct. Correct again. And then. A perfect, dead-center hit. The engineers stared in disbelief. So they reset the mechanism. Tested it again. And again. And again. The pigeons hit the target with astonishing reliability. Skinner knew what this meant. His idea was no longer theory. It was a functioning, battlefield-ready prototype. Inside the secret lab, the pigeons became more than test subjects. They were trainees, soldiers of a strange, feathered battalion. Each pigeon had its own name. Its own personality. Its own quirks. Some were hyper-focused. Some stubborn. Some almost seemed to enjoy the training. Skinner took extraordinary care of them. He ensured they were never harmed. Never mistreated. Never subjected to pain. He believed that respect was essential. That a creature performing such a critical task deserved dignity. The pigeons lived better than most lab animals of the era. Clean cages. Regular feeding. Gentle handling. And always. Always. Their favorite reward pellets. Waiting behind the screen. This bond between scientist and creature became the heart of Project Pigeon. A relationship built on trust and training. Not cruelty. But as the pigeons improved, the war changed. By 1944, Allied bombing strategies evolved. The US and Britain relied heavily on massive air campaigns. Thousands of bombers flying at once. Carpet bombing became standard. Precision no longer seemed to matter as much. To some generals, Project Pigeon felt unnecessary. Old-fashioned. Outdated. Even before it was used. And yet, the need for accuracy still existed. The Nazis dug deeper. Hid factories underground. Built hardened bunkers. Moved weapon sites into forests. A bomb guided by pigeons could still have changed the war. But convincing the military was proving harder than training the birds. As Skinner pushed forward, opposition intensified. Senior officers mocked the idea behind closed doors. Some called it the bird bomb. Others referred to it as Skinner's flying circus. At meetings, Skinner was often greeted with folded arms, raised eyebrows, forced smiles. He sensed the resistance. He heard their laughter. He understood the political climate. But he also understood this. Soldiers were dying. Targets were being missed. And precision was desperately needed. He believed, with every fiber of his being, that his pigeons could save lives. In May 1944, the project reached its peak. Skinner staged the most advanced demonstration yet. A fully functional bomb nose. Equipped with the tri-pigeon system. Simulated an airdrop trajectory through an elaborate rail system. The target. A scaled-down replica of a German ship. The bomb was released. Wind turbulence systems activated. Noise blasted. Lights flickered. Inside the nose. The pigeons tracked the target flawlessly. The bomb glided, corrected. Angled. Turned. And struck the target with pinpoint accuracy. A Navy officer in the room couldn't believe what he'd seen. "This thing works," he muttered. "God help us, it actually works." For a brief moment, Project Pigeon had momentum. Approval seemed within reach. Skinner felt it. His team felt it. Even the pigeons. In their own way, felt the excitement of the lab. But war is not decided by ideas alone. As support slowly grew, a new question emerged. Could the pigeons survive the real-world conditions of war? A bomb falling from 20,000 feet travels at incredible speeds. Turbulence, shifting pressure, temperature changes, violent shaking. Skinner believed they could handle it. His tests simulated much of the danger. And pigeons were durable creatures, stronger and calmer than most expected. But the military needed proof. Yet actual aerial testing was expensive, complex, dangerous. And the more officers looked at the budget, the more they hesitated. Ironically, Project Pigeon was too cheap. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't require huge new factories. It didn't enrich contractors. It didn't demand millions of dollars. It simply asked the military to believe in an idea that seemed too absurd to accept. Then, a rival emerged. An alternative program, based on electronic guidance, called Project Pelican, began gaining traction. It used radar, wires, mechanical relays, human-made circuitry. To generals and admirals, electronics felt predictable, logical, respectable. Pigeons did not. Even though Project Pelican frequently failed its tests, failing to lock onto targets, failing to adjust mid-flight, failing to hit anything. It looked like the future. Skinner's pigeons did not look like the future. They looked like birds. And war leaders were no longer willing to gamble their careers on something that could be politically embarrassing. In late 1944, the U.S. Navy and Army Air Forces held a final evaluation meeting. Skinner presented his data, accuracy rates, training success, cost efficiency, reliability under stress. The pigeons performed flawlessly. But at the end of the briefing, a high-ranking officer stood and declared, "Gentlemen, we cannot entrust a $25,000 bomb to a pigeon. Just like that. Years of research, thousands of hours of work, and a bizarre stroke of genius were dismissed." Project Pigeon was officially terminated. Skinner was devastated. Not for his own career, but because he believed the pigeons had been ready, that they could have made a difference, that their strange little contribution might have saved lives. But the world would never know. At least, not yet. The official cancellation came in a short, cold memo. No explanation. No thanks. Just a date, and the end. Skinner stood alone in the dim, empty laboratory where pigeons once tapped eagerly at glowing targets. The hum of machines faded. The screens went black. The rails fell silent. The pigeons, his trainees, his partners, were reassigned, given away, or released. Some fluttered around the lab as if looking for the blinking target they'd spent their lives pursuing. Skinner watched them go, his heart heavy. Years of work, gone. Years of potential, dismissed. A weapon that could have reshaped the war, locked away in a filing cabinet. America had moved on. The generals had moved on. The world had moved on. But fate wasn't finished with Project Pigeon. World War II pressed forward with devastating momentum. D-Day. The liberation of France. The firebombing of German cities. The brutal push into the heart of Europe. By early 1945, Allied dominance was overwhelming. Factories burned. Supply lines collapsed. The Reich's industrial skeleton crumbled under constant bombardment. To many military leaders, precision guidance, pigeon or otherwise, no longer seemed important. Victory looked inevitable. But the world was wrong. For while the war in Europe neared its end, a new storm brewed in the Pacific. In late 1944, Japanese forces unleashed one of the most frightening tactics the war had ever seen. Kamikaze attacks. Planes, fully fueled and packed with explosives, dove deliberately into American vessels. Destroyers. Carriers. Supplies ships. Dozens of ships sank. Thousands of sailors died. The Pacific became a graveyard of twisted steel. Military commanders panicked. Traditional defenses struggled to stop the suicide planes. Radar couldn't track them fast enough. Machine gun fire often came too late. Fighter intercepts frequently failed. The United States needed new weapons, faster ones, smarter ones, more accurate ones. Suddenly, the need for precision returned. And someone remembered Skinner's strange little project. In 1948, 3 years after WWII's end, the U.S. Navy quietly reopened the case. Skinner received a letter. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't praise. It was a request. Would he be willing to restart the pigeon bomb? Skinner didn't hesitate. He accepted immediately. Project Pigeon was reborn. Under a new code name. A name designed to remove the embarrassment of saying pigeon bomb. With new funding and modern materials, Skinner began improving the system. Pixels replaced blurry images. Better lenses increased clarity. New chambers were pressurized for real flight environments. The pigeons trained faster than ever. The technology advanced. The pigeons excelled. The weapon became frighteningly effective. The military was stunned. Project Pigeon was back on top. The Navy considered adopting the system for special missions. Destroying Japanese kamikaze boats. Hitting fast-moving naval targets. Striking hidden bunkers. Eliminating fortified island positions. The pigeons guided test bombs with razor-sharp precision. Some admirals, once skeptics, now saw value. The idea seemed less absurd in the context of Cold War innovation. Navy pilots watching the tests whispered, "Those birds are better shots than us." For a brief, flickering moment, Project Orkan stood on the edge of becoming a real operational weapon. But the same forces that killed Project Pigeon in 1944 returned once more. The late 1940s brought a technological revolution. Radar guidance grew powerful. Computers shrank in size. Analog tracking improved. Television-guided missiles became feasible. Engineers developed the first prototypes of precision radio command weapons. Electronics, everywhere, were rising. And pigeons? They suddenly looked outdated. Once again, the military demanded the weapon of the future. Not a biological marvel of the present. Skinner watched as electronic guidance programs received limitless funding. While his living guidance systems waited on shelves, fully trained, fully functional, fully ignored. History was repeating itself. In 1953, Skinner staged one last push. One final set of tests to prove the pigeon's worth. He loaded his best birds into the improved Orkan chambers. Modern screens. Better sensors. More durable casings. The tests were flawless. Whether the target was a ship, a building, or a moving vehicle, the pigeons pecked and corrected with machine-like precision. One scientist observing the trial said quietly, "We have created the world's most accurate creature." But not even flawless performance could change the tide. Electronic engineers were winning the political war. Their machines, though often less accurate, looked more acceptable to military leadership. In the end, Project Orkan faced the same fate as Project Pigeon. The program was cancelled. This time. Forever. When the cancellation memo arrived, Skinner didn't fight it. He didn't protest. He didn't plead. He simply nodded. Packed his notes. Released the remaining pigeons into the sky. And walked away. He knew the military would never accept it. Not because it didn't work. But because it worked too well. People couldn't handle the idea. That a simple bird could outperform their most advanced machines. But science doesn't care about pride. And history doesn't care about appearances. Project Pigeon was gone. But the dream, the principle, the innovation, lived on. Because Skinner had proven something extraordinary. A living creature. Small, humble, easily overlooked. Could guide a weapon more accurately than any machine of its time. The world never used it. But the concept changed military thinking forever. Living systems. Biological intelligence. Animal-assisted warfare. Behavioral engineering. All of these fields trace their origins back to this strange, forgotten wartime experiment. And though the pigeons never flew into battle, their legacy soared far beyond the laboratory.